The sugya pikuach nefesh, the Gemara Yuma, Pehei Amud Aleph to Pehei Amud Beis, very, very geschmack sugya, a very, very yisayistic sugya, and a sugya that has tremendous nafkaminas, geschmack and nafkaminas. It's a sugya where you see the lumdis and the halacha converge, the geschmack of the lumdis and the geschmack of the nafkaminas la halacha. And like I said last time, hopefully we'll just get the geschmack and we won't have to be mishtamish with the halacha lemaisa. We'll learn the halacha lemaisa for the hechatimtza of the geschmack of the sugya. The Gemara brings down in Yuman Daf Pehei about 7 different reasons. What's the reason why? We know that pikuach nefesh is doicha Shabbos, is doicha Yom Kippur, is doicha Kol HaTorah, except for the Gimel Chamuris. And the Gemara brings down basically 7 reasons. The Gemara brings Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. The Gemara brings down Rabbi Lazar. The Gemara brings down Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yonasan ben Yosef, Shimon ben Natzi, and everybody has a different reason. What's the reason why we're allowed to be Machal Shabbos in a situation of Pikuach Nefesh? For example, Rabbi Shmuel says, look, in b'machteretz yimatzei aganef, that is only a suffix moment. We don't know if the person's coming to kill or not. Not every ganef comes to kill. If the ganef has to kill, then maybe he'll kill. But it's not a vaday that it's going to come lidei Pikuach Nefesh. He's born shvichas, and shvichas damim is noira. And it causes shechina shetistalig in Yisrael. Kavachomer Pikuach Nefesh is going to be doicha Shabbos. It's one place. Rabbi Kiva brings a raya from the avoida that the avoida is doicha Shabbos. No, if avoida is doicha Shabbos, so Kavachomer that Pikuach Nefesh is going to be doicha Shabbos. The Gemara brings a raya. Rabbi Lazar says a different mezber from Mila. How are you allowed to be doicha Shabbos for one of the varim in the guf? So Kavachomer lekol gufa you could be doicha Shabbos. The Gemara brings down another Tana. And Shabtoisi Tishmaidu, Yachal Lekol, Tamid Lema Ach. No, Shabbos gets a Hagbala. Shabbos has a limitation. You only have to be Shomer Shabbos. It doesn't infringe on human life, on Yiddish life. The Gemara brings down Kodesh Lechem. He Mesur b'yedchem, lo yatem Mesur b'yada. You're in control, Kivyachal. Not that Shabbos is in control of you. Shabbos is in your hands. And then Reb Shimon ben Nasi brings down one of the timing, which is a little bit perhaps more famous. We'll see in a minute why. He says, "V'sham Rabbanei Yitzel HaShabbos, Chalel Alov Shabbos." For this person, be Machal Shabbos Echas, Kedei Sheyishmor Shabbos. It's a math cheshbon. It's Kedai to be Machal Shabbos in order that we can one Shabbos, in order that we can get more Shmir Shabbos. If we save this person's life, we'll be zeicha to many more Shmiras Shabbos. So it's a good math cheshbon. It's a cheshbon. It's a kemat, not even the pasuk. It's more of like a cheshbon. We're supposed to be Shomer Shabbos. If I can get Chil Shabbos on this person, and then as a result of that, I'll have thousands of Shmiras Shabboses. So it's kedai the Chil Shabbos. And then finally, the Gemara says a very interesting statement. Omar Avyuda Amar Shmuel. Now Shmuel, as you all know, was an Amoira. He was a very early Amoira. We say Rav Tanu Polik. Shmuel Pashtis, we don't say Shmuel Tanu Polig. There's a ritva in one place that talks about if Rebbe Yechanan was a Tanu Polig, and Agam that Shmuel was a bar pluksa of Rav. But Pashtis, we don't say that Rav is equal to Shmuel in as much as Shmuel is not considered a Tanu Polig. And over here, the Gemara says the most interesting statement, a quite shocking statement. Shmuel says, if I would have been there, as if to say, Kivyachal, I know my place. I can't argue with 6 Tanoim. But if I would have been there, then I would have said a whole different reason. A whole different reason. What reason would you have said? I would have said that my reasoning is better than everybody else's. What's my reasoning? You know why you're allowed to be Machal Shabbos in order to prevent a Yid from being Nifter, to be Daicha Pikuach Nefesh? The reason is v'chai behem. The Torah said its rules only until the point where it infringes on human life, on Yiddish life. V'chai behem. The Torah's mitzvahs were given in order to live. Eilu mitzvahs, the pasuk says. In order what? In order to live. V'chai behem. So if you have this situation of a Yiddish life, and it's against the one of the mitzvahs, all the averis, etc. So then the life wins. Human life is Yiddish life is doicha. Yiddish life is doicha. But this is the most interesting statement, because Shmuel is a Tana. Now he's an Amoira, and Shmuel saying a reason which he's saying is better than everybody else's reason. What's the reason why his reason is taka better than all the other Tanoim? Because the Tanoim's reason, the Gemara goes on to say, are only going to help you for a situation of suffix. But Masha'en came for a situation of vadai, it doesn't help. How do we know Safek Pikuach Nefesh is Doiche Shabbos, is Doiche all the mitzvahs except for the Gimel Chamuris? So Shmuel's reason works because V'chai Behem. That's what the Gemara says. The other reasonings only work in a situation of Vadai. That's Adkan the Gemara, and it seems to be that Lalocha, we paskin V'chai Behem. Shockingly, we'll see in a minute exactly how that works, but we paskin V'chai Behem, and we'll have to see, do we paskin the other reasons? And it's going to be tremendous nafkaminas, because now I know that Pikuach Nefesh is Doicha Shabbos, even in a situation of Safek Pikuach Nefesh, it's Doicha Shabbos, and even when there's lots of Sfeikis, like the case of the Gemara talks about the Mapoilis, which Laida, unfortunately, we saw this year. The Mapoilis, that's with Doicha Shabbos. Why? Because for Safek Pikuach Nefesh with Doicha Shabbos, because of the Chai Behem. Adkan the Gemara. Now let's start with the Shaila. The Shaila is that Lamaskana, the Gemara says, Kulam Islay Pircha. All of these reasonings have a Shaila you can ask. And the Gemara goes on and says, except for the Chai Behem. Now, what's the nafkamina, right? So the Gemara says, even on the Shamru, even on Chalel Shabbos Echos, in order to get other Shmira Shabboses, right? It seems to be that there's a Pircha. Does that mean that all these reasons are not La'alacha? Does that mean that Chalel Shabbos Echos is not La'alacha? Now, by side, what if I could show you a Moifis? What if I could show you a situation of where you don't have the Chai Behem, but you have the Me'af Cheshbon. You have Chalel Shabbos Echos Kedei Sheyishmor Shabbos Harbe. So am I going to be allowed to make the Cheshbon or no? The only time we're makel is when you have the Chai Behem. Now, what do I mean? What's the case? Right? So I have about 5 different cases over here. I see that the Olam over here already have one of the cases over here. And in the Marmikaimis, we had many of the cases over here. But let's try to figure this out. Do we hold of Chalel Shabbos Echos, or La'alacha we hold only of the Chai Behem? So the truth is that, like I said before, right? The Bama says there's a Gemara in Shabbos on Daf Kuf Nunal from the base, and the Gemara says Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Oimer Tinak ben Yoimai Chai Mechal Love is a Shabbos. A baby that's 1 day old, you're Mechal Shabbos. David Melech Yisrael Meis ain't Mechal as a Shabbos. You hear this? David Melech Yisrael, the king of Cloud Yisrael. For him, we're not Mechal Shabbos once he's nifter. But Majay Tina ben Yoimai, we are. Why are we Mechal Shabbos for him? So the Gemara says a very interesting thing. The Gemara brings down Shmuel. Says the Gemara, Amra Toido, Chalel Alov Shabbos Echos, Kedei Shishmo Shabbos Harbe. But Mashain came when it comes to David HaMelech is mace, and we're not Machalo because he's mace, he's bottled from the mitzvahs. So from David HaMelech, we're not going to get any more mitzvahs. But from this Tinak ben Yomer, we're going to have a lifetime of mitzvahs. So Mamela be Machalo one Shabbos for him because we're going to get lots of Shabboses. Adkan. Comes again Rashi in Shabbos and Daf Lamed of the base. And Rashi says, Pikuach Nefesh, where do I learn it from? Mi v'chai behem, v'lo shiyamas behem. What's going on over here? The Gemara in Shabbos on Kuf Nunal from the base says that where do I know that you're allowed to be doicha Shabbos? Where do I know that you're allowed to be doicha all the mitzvahs? I know from the pasuk of the Chalal Shabbos Echos, this Me'af Cheshbon, that it's kedai to be Mechalal Shabbos in order that we get lots of Shabboses. And Rashi goes with like the Gemara. Rashi goes with the time that the Gemara seems to say. The Gemara in Yuma says, what's the reason why we're Mechal Shabbos? The Gemara says, because V'chai Behem. So V'chai Behem seems to be the reason. Rashi says that the reason why we're Mechal Shabbos is V'chai Behem. Says the Marsha in Shabbos Lamed Amid Beis. Zok the Helik Marsha. He says, no. Rashi is the Iker. Rashi's the Iker. Zok the Aviju is Loshin. Sarach Loimar the Samech Adrasha de V'chai Behem. When the Gemara says it, the Gemara is lavdafka. And the Gemara means the Iker reason is taka, v'chai behem, v'lo shiyamis, kepirish Rashi. And Rashi says, shmor Shabbos Echos. That reason that Rashi says, shmor Shabbos Echos, kedei that we can get many Shabbos, he said that reason is itche. So says the Marsha, the Gemara in Shoyel, the Gemara in Kuf Nun Aleph is lavdafka. The Iker reason is v'chai behem. So Rabbi say now the plot thickens. So you're telling me that the Iker reason is V'chai Behem. So now I really need to know, what if I have a situation that I do not have V'chai Behem, which I'll explain in a moment. How could you have a case where you don't have V'chai Behem, but I do have the Me'af Cheshbon of Chalel Shabbos Echos. So the Marsha seems to say, we don't paskin like that. That time is Itcha. But that Rabbi says is a very big chiddush to say that it's Itcha. However, then, Shmuel is being chaylik on Tanoim. Pashtus, he would learn that Shmuel is an addition. Those reasons are good. The reasons of Chalel Shabbos Echos, for example, is good. And if I'd have a situation that all I had was Chalel Shabbos Echos, Kadesh Yishmor Shabbos Harbe, I would be soymich on that. But Shmuel has a better reason, and we'll see what the nafkamina is. What's the nafkamina? Kum to gain the Mogin Avram in Simin Shin Vav Sivkat and Chavtes, and we found the case. And now we're going to find out, what do the Poskim hold? Are the Poskim willing to be makel to let someone be Mechalel Shabbos, even though there's no V'chai Behem? But there's the Mev Cheshbon of Chalel Shabbos Echos Kadesh Yishmor Shabbos Harbe. What's the case? The Gemara. The Rashba, brought in the Beis Yosef in the Torah in Siman Shin Vav and Sif Yudalet, says a very, very shrekliche case, a very, very unfortunate case, where they're taking a young girl and they're taking her to be shmatted up, and she's being taken off the derech, a life of pure avei, a treifa life of a guy, and she's being taken off the derech to live the life of a treifa guy, and it's happening all on Shabbos. And now we want to know, can we be Mechalel Shabbos in order to save her from not living the life of a treifa guy? Now there's another sugya which converges, which that sugya we're not going to talk about now. That sugya is more in Reish and Daled. That sugya is in the beginning of Masechta Shabbos. And that's a sugya about, am I allowed to do an Avera to save somebody else from a bigger Avera? But that sugya gets very complex, and we get involved with the fact, did the girl do something in order to cause, was she a Pesheya? Was she the one that caused this to us to do the Ver? Or was she an Oinus? But let's talk about the easy case. Let's say the girl did nothing wrong and she's being taken away to be shmatted up, and she's a little girl and she's not going to have the seichel to say no, and therefore she's going to be shmatted up. So here we want to know, can we be Mechalel Shabbos, which in this case we would allow you to chatei kadeshi yitzkechavercha because she didn't do anything wrong. And we would be allowed in that case to apply the klal of chatei, to do an avera in order to save somebody else. So my question is a different question. Our shaila is that are we allowed to be Mechalel Shabbos in order to save her from what? She's not going to die. These goyim aren't taking to kill her. We're not talking about a situation of where it's a pikuach nefesh. That's the case the Rishonim are talking about. That's not a pikuach nefesh. So we want to know, can we take her? Can we be Mechalel Shabbos to take her away from what? From doing a life of a treifa life? So what's that, Rabbi Isaac? Is that v'chai b'hem? That's not v'chai b'hem. Maybe the mashkiach will say that's v'chai b'hem because a life without Torah and mitzvahs is nishkin leben, right? But in halacha, that's not v'chai b'hem. We're not saving her life. So here we don't have the pasuk of Shmuel. So here now we really need to know the answer. Are we allowed to be Mechalel Shabbos even when we don't have the pasuk of V'chai Behem? So what do we have over here? Why should we be allowed to be Mechalel Shabbos? Because over here we have the math cheshbon. Chalel Shabbos Echas, go and be Mechalel Shabbos and save this girl so that we can get many more Shabbosis. If we Mechalel Shabbos now, we're going to get a whole life of Torah and mitzvahs. She'll marry the Gadol Adar. So what do we paskin? Kum to gain the Mogen Avram and Siman Shin Vav Zivkot and Chavtes, and he says, yes, you're even allowed to go chutz migimel parsais. You're even allowed to go outside the tchumen to even do deraises, and even other deraises the Mishnah Berurah brings down over here. Why? And now you understand the gewaltige diktuk in the poskim over here. They don't say because v'chai b'hem, because over here you don't have v'chai b'hem. So when you read the Mogen Avraham, now you understand. Talk the Mogen Avraham. In order to prevent Chilul Shabbos of a lifetime, and so says the Mishnah Berurah and Siman Shin Vav Sivkot and Zayin, that means there are two drushas, and I could even be makel when I have one drasha and not the other. So even though I don't have a situation of a chaybem, that's our case. Over here, we're talking about a situation of where there's no life on the line. We don't have a chaybem, yet we allow you to be Mechalel Shabbos. Why? Because I have the cheshbon of Chalel Shabbos Echos. The Mela, Rabbi say, now we have the answer to our shaila. Is Shmuel arguing on the other Rishonim? Maybe not. Maybe Shmuel's adding another reason, and my reason is better, like Shmuel said, because my reason's even going to work for a suffix. So maybe Shmuel's adding. If that's the case, so now in a case where I don't have a chaybem, I always still have to rely on the Chalel Shabbos Echos Kadesh Yishmor Shabbos Harbe. Now, by side, we're going to have a question on that, and we'll get to that question in a moment. but I want to finish the nafkaminas. The question we're going to have on that is, wait a minute, if you're listening, so then you chap, there's a very big problem. That means that if all I have is Chalel Shabbos Echas, and I don't have a Chaybem, so then Rabbi said, no, I want to see one of the panelists over here. So what's going to be the question? Then that means I'm only going to be allowed to be Machal Shabbos when I could vadai savor. Because remember, what did Shmuel say? Shmuel said that my pasuk is better. Why? Because my pasuk allows me to be Machal Shabbos even in a suffix. That means that the other psukim, the Chalel Shabbos Echas Kedei, it's a math cheshbon. So it only works when you have the cheshbon. Be Machal Shabbos in order that you can get thousands of Shabbosis. But that's only if you're vadai going to get the 1,000 Shabbosis, not for a suffix Shabbos. So then it comes out an unbelievable chiddush. It comes out an unbelievable chiddush, which we'll see if that's true in a moment. That yes, we have a raya from the Mishnah Berurah and the Magen Avram, and Taka, this is brought also in the Chayodam and Samech Chesed Beis. Yes, and the Graz and Shin Vav Siklates. Yes, we have a raya from the Magen Avram and all these poskim that when you have just Chalel Shabbos Echos, you're allowed to be Machal Shabbos. However, we have to dan. Maybe if I don't have a Chaybem, so then I'm only going to be allowed to be Machal Shabbos b'makom safek. Let's come back to that Shaila. Let's first finish up. What are the other nafkaminas? I saw that the Olam over here, the other nafkaminas. What the other nafkaminas in a situation of where I don't have the Chaybem, but I do have Chalel Shabbos Echos. So this, Rabbi say, this is an interesting thing you see from the Machs Avram. You see from the Imre Yosher, we'll quote him first. You see from the Imre Yosher in Chelik Beis, in Simin Kuf Lamed. He says the most interesting thing. He has a situation over there of a ger that maled himself and did not yet do tefillah. Now, everybody say a ger that maled himself is the closest thing we have to a guy who's going to become a Jew, because nobody is maled themselves unless they're very, very serious about becoming a Jew. I think they say a vart. I think they say that when the Achim came to Yosef Hatzadik and they asked him, no, you're Yosef, prove you're Yosef. So Yosef showed the bris milah. No, so the Kasha, I don't remember who asked. I think the Achrayim, they asked the Kasha, maybe the Maldiskin. He asked the Kasha, what's the raya? We know that Yosef made everybody in Mitzrayim make a bris milah. So if Taka, everybody in Mitzrayim did a bris milah, so what's the raya that Yosef is gemalt, that he's one of the Achim? Right. So, if you look good in Rashi, so Rashi says that he showed them that it was Yaakov's milah. Like, the Moilim understand this, that there's something miyuchad about when this Moil did the milah. But the Pashup shot is that, what do you mean? This crazy king, he wants everybody to do a bris milah, but he's not going to do it to himself. Verstehst? So he showed, if I did it to myself, it must be that I'm one of you. I'm your brother. So, when you have a ger, boy, say that he hasn't yet quite finished the process. He's at the point of Milah, but we know that we have to wait a few days until he does the tefillah. And now it's the first Shabbos. Now that Shabbos comes, and he's not feeling very well because he just had a bris milah and he's in a matzav of bikuach nefesh. Is this person a guy? He's a full-fledged guy, 100%. He doesn't have a din of a yid b'chlal. Okay. Are we allowed to be Machal Shabbos? And it's probably, you know what? I don't know if today it's a common shiloh, but it's for sure a common concept, right? They didn't do the bris milah. They didn't do the tefillah right away. So here he is on Shabbos. They did the bris milah on Friday, on Thursday, and whatnot. Here comes Shabbos. He's not feeling well. It's a very normal case. Are we allowed to be Machal Shabbos? What is this case? This is a case that it's a bara that he's going to be a Shomer Shabbos. I mean, nobody undergoes a milah unless he's going to become a Shomer Shabbos. He's for sure going to become a Shomer Shabbos. He's for 2 years been trying to become a Jew. He's for sure going to become a Jew. So now we don't have a chaybem because the chaybem was not said to goyim. The chaybem, of course, is only said to those that have the din of leisamid al dam reyecha. He has to be reyecha, and a goy is not reyecha. So we don't have the chaybem, but we have the cheshbon. We have chalel Shabbos echas kedei sheyishmer Shabbos harvei. Kum to game the Imre Yosher me'arik with chelik beis in kuflam. Unbelievable cool over here. He says, yeah, we have the cheshbon, and we know he's going to convert. So the Noibasai, I guess until he does a bris milah, who knows if he's going to convert? But here we have the case of says the Paiskin. Hare, we know that we paskin like Shmuel, it's true. But you see over here from the Magen Avram that we also paskin Chalel Shabbos Echas Kedei Shishmer Shabbos Tzarbe. As a Gazai, they want to say that you can be Mechal Shabbos. And the Chutshani, Rav Nissen Karelitz, in the 74th page, he paskins like that, halacha l'maisa, that we're allowed to taka be Mechal Shabbos, ayin in the Machzor Avram, and taka zeh, you're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. If you want to have a Geshmaka Oynik Shabbos, take a look in the Panim Yofis, in Nitzavim, in Perek Chavtes, in Pasuk Yud Gimel. I can't be Ma'irich, ayin sham, and you'll have a lot of anah. Another case, Rabbi Yisai, and this one of the Choshev Oilam said before, another nafkamina of where we're going to have the chai, where we don't have the chaybam, but we do have the me'af cheshbon, is in Uber. Now this is based on Rishonim and Nida, on Def Mem Daled and Beis, which gets us into the very big shaila, is to have an abortion. Is that an Isser Ritzicha? Is it an Isser Daraisa? Is it some other type of Isser? We know that the Tzitz Eliezer, when he wrote a tshuva about abortion, his tshuva was called Be'inyan Apalas Ubarim. Be'inyan the Apala, the falling of Ibarim. Mashen came Rav Moshe Zechariah Levracha, when he wrote the tshuva, he called it Be'inyan Harigas Ubarim. I think we know which way he held, and I think we know which way he held. But Kapanim, there's a big shaila in the Rishonim, in Nida, about the life of an Uber, of a fetus. Is that called a life? The Ramban and the Ritva, they're going with the Shita. This is also the Ramban in Torah Sa'adam in the 29th page. They're going with the Shita that an Uber is not called alive. It's nafkamina about Apala, Avada Chas V'Chalila, to do an abortion. It means copy certain situations and when and what. But Al Kapanim, the Ramban goes that it's not called V'chai. That means he's not alive. Says the Ramban that Minela, to save an Uber's life, to save an Uber, you're not allowed to save a number mitzad v'chai b'hem. You're not allowed to be Mechal Shabbos mitzad v'chai b'hem because he's not v'chai. Now the Maisa, we know that anyways, if a lady is pregnant, so the Rishonim say that if she's pregnant and there's a problem with the Uber, we're going to be allowed to save the Uber because usually it's anyways going to be a pikuach nefesh for the mother. It's going to be a pikuach nefesh for the mother anyways. But let's say you have a case, le'aleinu chalila, that the mother was nifter, and we want to know, can we be Mechal Shabbos just for the Uber? That's the shaila. What's the din of the Uber? So we don't have a chaybam according to these Rishonim. So now Rabbi said you heard that we are Mechal Shabbos even for the me'af cheshbon. So then we'll apply over here Chalel Shabbos Echas Kadeshi Yishmor Shabbos is Harbe. Who says that? The Ramban and Nida. And you see over here how beautiful the lashonis of the Ramban, the Ritva over here. Leinian Leida Davar Barer, that he's not Bechlal Nefesh Adam. An Uber is not a Nefesh. The Lav Kushiyahu. So now we're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos? Because Omra Torah Chalel Shabbos Echos Kadeshi Kaim Shabbos is Harbe. That's exactly what the Ramban is saying. Even when I don't have a chaybam, I still could be Mechal Shabbos for what? For the me'af cheshbon. And that says in the Ramban, and that says in the Ritva, and the Torah in Tafresh Dayan. That's our simon. We're learning Yom Kippur and Yonim. Ubras Humanikis Misanis. And Ubra Shiricha Michael, if a lady that's pregnant smells something and she has to have the hana of it, and it gets dangerous, who's it dangerous for? Says the Torah, Vim lo yitnu la tistaken he oy havlad. And if she's not going to have this piece of schnitzel that she's smelling on Yom Kippur, it's going to be dangerous for her or the Vlad. The Torah is medoyak that it's enough that we'll be Mechal Shabbos, even if we know that the Pikuach Nefesh is just on the Vlad. What's that? That's not the Chaybab. That's just Chalel Shabbos Echas Kadesh Yishmor. This is the psak of the Bir Alocha in Shin Lamed Tziv Zayin. Pasuk Ritva brings the Ritva. We have the Ramban that Afilo on an Uber we're Mechal. And this Rabbi is clearly the psak Alocha. Maisa, even on an Uber, which is less than 40 days. And even in less than 40 days, we know in less than 40 days, that's a whole shaila. But lefi the me'af cheshbon, givaldik. We still have the me'af cheshbon, Chalel Shabbos Echas. Now it's true, the night of Yehuda and Choshen Mishpat in Nuntes, as Maridik Chumras over here, but it's clear that the psak halacha is like we said. Another nafkamina. So far we have one nafkamina, the girl is getting shmaded. Then we have a nafkamina of a ger shemol v'loy tavel. Now we have a nafkamina of an ober, are we mechal Shabbos for an ober? Another nafkamina, like the Olam said before, is, and we'll see in a moment, I'm being asked a question from Rabbi Kahan. He says, how do you know the ober is going to live? That we'll see in a moment, that what happens in a mikra of a suffix. But he's right. So far, we only know Oifen Vadai. But we're going to get to that shayla. That's why I mentioned before, we have a shayla that we have to get to. But now by saying, there's a geshmak in Toisvis. This brings you back to your days in yeshiva. By saying, Brings me back to my days in yeshiva. Taisis and Baba Mitzia and Daf Kuf Yadal on the base. The Gemara brings down over there that Eliyahu Navi, the Gemara brings Amalei Lav Koyinata, Tamalari. Eliyahu Navi, we know his Pinchas is a Koyin. So the Ri asks the Kasha. Heyach Hechia Benoshel Almana. We know that Eliyahu Navi did Tchias HaMesim on the Ben Almana. How is he allowed to do Tchias HaMesim? Hooray, the kid was dead. The child was dead. How did he go into the house where the child was not alive? Hooray, he's a Koyin and it's Tumas oil. So how is Eliyahu Navi, who is a Koyin, allowed to be Matame himself? Koyin Ayah. Vice Mededa Lageled. The Yesh Loimar. Listen to Taisvis. Shaya Borer Loishi Chayehu Lekach. Because he knew bevadai that he's going to be Machaye the child. And therefore it's Mutter Mishum Pekuach Nefesh. Avoisai. This child is dead. There's no V'chai Behem. What's Taisus talking about? Taisus asks, how did Eliyahu Navi was a Kohen go in to be Machaye, the Ben Almana? Hooray. The child's dead. There's no V'chai Behem on Rabbi Isai on somebody that's dead. V'chai Behem means to continue a life that's alive. It doesn't mean to be Machaye Mesim. So what's Pshat in this Taisus? Taisus says, since he knew he would be Machaye, it's Mutter Mi Pekuach Nefesh. So the Emek Shiloh, who was the Emek Shiloh, Rabbi said, hey, look in Netziv, the Rebbe in Netziv. He says, L'chayra, what's this all about? So he says, Vice we don't have the Chai Be'em. All we have over here is what? Chalel Shabbos Echos, Kadesh Yishma Shabbos Arbe. So you're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos for a Cheshbon, a Me'af Cheshbon. That we're going to get more Shmir Shabbos out of him. So you're allowed to be Mechal your Kahuna in order to make sure that this child is going to live. So we don't have the Chai Be'em, but we have the Me'af Cheshbon. It's Kedai to be Mechal Shabbos in order to get what? In order Mechal of my Tumah, Mechal any Avera, in order to get more mitzvahs, So here you have it again, Mechal Shabbos or Mechal Tumah, even though there's no V'chai Behem, but you still have the math question of Chalel Shabbos Echas, Kadesh Yishmor Shabbos is Harbe. And Rabbi say there's many, many more, but right away now, everybody's struck by a Shiloh. We have here Kama V'Kama Nafkaminas. Everybody's here going to be struck by a Shiloh. The Chayra, if what we're saying is true, that the only pasuk that you have over here is Chalel Shabbos Echas Kadesh Yishmor Shabbos is Harbe, and that you don't have a Chai Behem. But didn't the Gemara tell us that Chalel Shabbos Echas is only mutter b'makom safek? It's only mutter b'makom vaday. But b'makom safek, that's why Shmuel's pasuk was better. So now we have a new Shiloh. Now that Shmuel said the Chai Behem, can we say here a chiddush? Now that Shmuel was said the Chai Behem is going to be a gilui onto Chalel Shabbos Echas. And that just like the Chai Behem is mutter b'makom safek, now even the Chalel Shabbos Echas, because he's not going to be chaylik on the Tanoim. But here, Rabbi Yisai, there's a davar nifla from the Netziv, and it should bring a smile to your faces. Frek the Netziv. How come Taisvis said that? And everybody learns the Taisvis has the kasha. It says that Eliyahu Navi was a kohen, and Eliyahu Navi was a kohen, and that's why Frek Taisvis. How is he allowed to do Tchias HaMesim? And for Taisvis, because it was Pikuach Nefesh. So we just proved that you don't have a Chai Behem, yeah, but you have Chalel Shabbos Echas. Frek all the ganze Welt on Taisvis. Why does Taisvis say these words? He knew for sure that he was going to be able to heal this child. Everybody knows the Aleph Beis of Pikuach Nefesh, the Aleph Beis of Chai Behem, the Aleph Beis of Pikuach Nefesh is Doicha Shabbos, is that Pikuach Nefesh is Doicha, even Safek Pikuach Nefesh, and that we're always Doicha Shabbos, even for a Safek of Pikuach Nefesh. So why did Taisvis say over here that Eliyahu Navi was allowed to go in? Because he knew b'vadai that he would be able to mashma. If Eliyahu Navi had a safek, if his koiches were going to work, he wouldn't be allowed to go in and be mechal his kedushas kahuna. Sakta netziv davar nifla. Because over here we don't have a chai behem. Sakta netziv. Here's where you see the nafkamina. The Taisus is bedikta mamish. Taisus says the reason why Eliyahu Navi was allowed to go in was only because he was vadai. Says the Netziv, you see from over here, that the only time you're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos or Mechal one of the Averis, when all you have is Chalel Shabbos Echas, is if you have a Vadoyas. But if you have a Safek, you're not going to be allowed. As I talked in the Tiv, and the Cheshbon is mamish beautiful. But Manasseh, Baisai, all those Rishonim that we quoted before, like the Ramban, or like the Chayei Yodam, we'll see in a moment, and the grass, in all the cases that we spoke about, let's say, for example, the case of the girl that was going to be shmatted up. So we said, why are you allowed to save her? There's no v'chayvem, but there's yes, Chalel Shabbos Echas. So Chalel Shabbos Echas is enough to save her. But the Chayrit should come out that I'm only going to be allowed to save her if what? If it's a vadai that I could save her. Listen to the Chayadam. If they want to take this girl away from Klal Yisrael, mitzvah on everyone to be Mechal Shabbos, even deraises. Afilu safek, shemet's not going to work. But it's k'moy safek pikuach nefesh. Says the Graz, mamish the same thing. In Shin Vav Klav Tes, the Graz says that you're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos, ein l'cha pikuach nefesh, afilu b'safek atzala. Afilu b'safek atzala. So by side. And also the Ramban over there, when he was talking about by the case of an Uber, and I was asked before, I think by Rabbi Kahan, he says, what do you mean? By an Uber, we only have Chalel Shabbos Echa, so you're only allowed to save if you're Vadai going to save the Uber. The Ramban says you're allowed to even Shema Yishmor Shabbos is Harbe. Lashon the Ramban is even if maybe you're going to be able to be Shomer Shabbos. So you see this that there's even just in Shema, even Safek. The Chayra got together of a Chaybam. Says the Graz in the Kuntras Achron, Imam asked this kasha. He says, Lo Yadina Besfeika, Umiu Baran, Yisir Machal, even for an Uber. The Efsher, says the Balatanya, Efsher Lebasa, the Gully Kra, once we have the Gilui of the Pasuk of the Chaybam, that we're Machal Shabbos by Pikuach Nefesh, in Cain, it's a Gilui on to the Nes Cheshbon. And we're Machal Shabbos, even the mikra that it's a suffix. And so Paskins, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch and Siman Tzadi Beis Yod, afilu in musafek, Rabbi Isai. So that's what comes out. So now what do we have, Rabbi Isai? What do we have? We have over here, the Chaybam is a Gilui on Chalel. And we have over here that we paskin Chalel. And we paskin that Chalel, even in a situation of where you don't have a Chay, like an Uber, like the girl being shmatted, what are you going to do with Taisus? I guess maybe Taisus holds like the Netziv, or he's going to hold like that Cheshbon, that it's only when you have a Vadai. It's only when you're going to have a Vadai. So this, Rabbi Isai, is the first part. Now the Shaila is, okay, so we know we paskin Chalel, and we know we paskin Chalel in Safek, and even though we have no V'chaybem, is Shabbos Dafka? We kept saying Chalel Shabbos Echad, that we can get more Shabboses. Rabbi say, what if we're not going to get more Shabboses? What if we're just going to get mitzvahs? For example, let's say the person, he's unfortunately, he's under all the rubble and he's a geisis. Are we Machal Shabbos? In that case, we're not going to get another Shabbos over here. We're definitely not getting any more Shabboses. The doctors are telling us he's not going to live more than the end of this Shabbos. So the Chasam Sofer, in your day, Reish Memei, in Dibra Matzla V'hinei, he says, what do you want? The Lashon is mashma, dafka gedei l'shmor Shabbos is harbe. And the Minchas Chinuch and the Mosif Shabbos in Mitzvah Lamed Beis, he says, leman the Omar beyuma, the Yafina and the Pikuach Nefesh is doiche from V'shamru, in Cain b'posik mashma dafka sheyishmor Shabbos is harbe. That's unbelievable chiddush. But Rabbi say, you look in that same Ramban, that's our Makor, that we paskin Chalel by an Uber, and his Lashon is afilu achilin in shmiras mitzvahs. He doesn't say Shabbos. He says mitzvahs. And the Ran says mitzvahs. And who brings this halacha? The Rebbe, the Bir halacha, and Shinchav Tezar Siman. And Sif Dalet in Dibra Matzchot Ella. He says, Ledina leitali klal b'mitzvahs. It doesn't depend on mitzvahs. Einatam, the reason why doiche mitzvah echas is b'shvil mitzvahs, ella we're doiche kol mitzvahs b'shvil chayim shel Yisrael. Now he says why? Sharei we learn out from Shmuel v'chaybam. V'chaybam teaches me that the mishpatei Torah are rachamim and chesed and shalom ba'olam, and therefore kain lekol hanitnoi. Huadin also to all of the Tanoim that learned out from their Pesukim, Mizbeach and Mila and Machteres and everything. You see that the Torah is just trying to be megala to us, that the Torah is makbid on a life, on a Yiddish life. But then he ends with these words. Bar mehoi de chalal Shabbos echas. Bir halacha sounds not like that. The bir halacha sounds like you have to have chalal Shabbos, the actual shmir of Shabbos. Very big tzarchi in this this bir halacha. Ayin sham the Higger Smoisha in Chelik Gimel Siman Samach Tes. He says no such thing. Lekulei alma we're mechal Shabbos even on a chayisha, and everything here he says is just a time of alma. He says it's all just a time of alma. We're mechal Shabbos even when we don't have a chaybem, even on a suffix, even if we're not going to get anything more than chayisha, and not only that, even if we're not going to get one mitzvah. And the Miriam Yuman Bay says, Afapi, that he won't be able, to do anything except to do tshuva. That's also enough. But the Rav Moshe says, no. Even if he's not going to do tshuva, even if he's in a coma, and he's not going to do anything, with Pashit Mechal Shabbos, even to get one more breath of life, even when we don't have a chaybem. So that's what I say. The Geder Advar. Now, I say, Lamaisa, what's the nafkamina of all this? The nafkamina is a lot of the shilas that the post can talk about. For example, what happens if I'm not going to get any mitzvahs at all? I'm not going to get any mitzvahs at all. Now, we're not talking here about a goy or not bikoiris, because when you talk about a goy or not bikoiris, so the Torah, the pasuk that tells me how I know I'm mechal Shabbos is like the Mishnah Berurah brings in Shin Kav Ches, in Siv Katan Vav, and in Shin Chav Tes, Siv Katan Tes, and in the Bir Halacha in Dibra Maschal Elo that we just discussed in Sif Talid, that the getter of why you're Mechal Shabbos to save a life is because Leisamoid al Damrei Echa. In other words, the Chaybem tells me I'm allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. For who? For whomever is included in Leisamoid al Damrei Echa. So he's got to be Rabbi Sarei Echa. And that's why for a Goy, and that's why for an Apikoiris, and that's why for a Mummer, that you're not going to be allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. Now, the Meiser Rabbi Sai, what if there's Ava? What if there's a situation of Ava, and it would be dangerous if we're not going to be Mechal Shabbos? So that's Rabbi Yisrael. I'm not going to say it goes without saying, because it's a very big chiddush that the Bir Halacha says not like this. But if there's a situation of Ava, so the Mishnah Berurah says an unbelievable chiddush in Siman Shin Lamed in Sivkat and Ches. He says over there that if there's Ava, you're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos midrabanan to save a guy, or an apikoiris. Now, boy say this Mishnah Berurah, Techsam Sofer in Yerdei Kuf Lamed Aleph, he says if there's Ava, there's Pikuach Nefesh, and if you're not going to save the guy's life, and people are going to find out, Fregnish tomorrow, it's going to be all over the world, and it's going to be a Pikuach Nefesh for everybody in Klal Yisrael. So you are Mechal Shabbos. And the Goyin Rav Moshe in Chelik Daled Siman Tes says one of the strongest words he ever says against the Mishnah Berurah in all 697 simanim of the Mishnah Berurah. He says Pella ala Goyin Achofetz Chaim. That he writes that the Roifim today, even the Yoser Ksherim, even the good doctors, they're Mechal Shabbos for Goyim, and the Mishnah Berurah says it's wrong and it's terrible and they're mazed. Rav Moshe says, what are you talking about? Rusland. Hare, you lived over there, he tells the Chofetz Chaim in Poland and Radin in Rusland. Hare, by Yarsak Tanis, there was one doctor, Borer, he says, if the doctor wouldn't be Mechal Shabbos for the guy, he said by tomorrow would be Pearson, would be Sakana for all of the Jews in all the world, Kishinev all over again, Fragnished. So Rav Moshe says it's a Pella. He says, Stama Sotel Hagla Sinner, it would be terrible. Pashit Bismanenu and Rosh Zalman in Shulchan Shloim Sivkot and Zion. He says, Befrat Bismanenu. Today, Fragnish Rabbi said, they press one button, it'll be all over the world. That this Jewish doctor, he wouldn't be Mechal Shabbos for a Friday. So if it's something that there's even a Havamina that people would know, there's no Shaila with Mechal Shabbos to save a guy, but not Midine Pikuach Nefesh, Midine Pikuach Nefesh of us, not Midine Pikuach Nefesh of him. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, so those cases where Mechal Shabbos be'eva, because there'll be Eva and whatnot. But I'm talking in the cloud. Are we Mechal Shabbos, now that we see we're Mechal Shabbos, in order to get mitzvahs, in order to get a Yiddish life? Right? What if we're going to be Mechal Shabbos for somebody that we're never going to get a mitzvah? What's the case? So there's a base mayor. This you see an unbelievable correspondence between Rebbe Kiva Eger and his good Yedid, that's what he calls him. The base mayor in Shin Lamed Dibra Maschal Alzeh Avodah Zarah, and Rebbe Kiva Eger has a correspondence in the Sefer base mayor to his good friend, the base mayor, the Rebbe Kiva Eger, base mayor. right? And they discussed this Shiloh Mamish. What were they talking about over there? They were talking about a karai, a situation of where you were going to be Michal Shabbos for a karai. A karai was clearly an apikoiris, and clearly a Rasha, and clearly it didn't have this heter, excuse me. But the Shiloh was, could we be Michal Shabbos for the child of a karai? Now this child isn't doing anything wrong right now. And this child, Api Teva, Api Chazaka, is going to grow up a tray for life. So are we Michal Shabbos for this child? In other words, the child is not a Rasha. So Mitzad Rasha, we're allowed to be Michal Shabbos, he's not a Rasha. But Mitzad Sheni, we're never going to get a drop of mitzvahs from this kid. So the base mayor, unbelievable. He says, Shmuel Lamad Heter min apasik v'chai b'hem. He says, Makol Makan, he says here the opposite. We've been dining till now that we have a chayban. Do we also hold the Vishamru? And we prove that we also hold the Vishamru. He's trying to prove the opposite. He's trying to prove that even though we hold the V'chayban, but maybe V'chayban is kafuf to the Hagbala, to the limitation of Chalel Shabbos Echos. And Chalel Shabbos Echad says that we're not going to do v'chaybem unless we get Shabbos, unless we get mitzvahs, unless we get something. So it's true there's v'chaybem over here. Here's the opposite. Till now we were dining, do we say Chalel without v'chaybem? Now we want to know, do we say v'chaybem where we don't have Chalel? So here says the base mayor, an unbelievable chiddush. He says even Shmuel Lamed Heter min apasik v'chaybem yikol makam mistamalei polig l'dina natana. He's not arguing on the Tana, like we said before. So Shmuel is just coming to add, but he's not coming to detract. So the only way I'm going to be Michal Shabbos is, even when there's V'chaybem, is when I'm going to get Shabbos Harbe. So he has a tzad to say an unbelievable chiddush, that we won't be Michal Shabbos for this Ben HaKaroi, because we're not going to get any Shmir Shabbos out of him. Rebbe Kiva Eger takes strong opposition. Rebbe Kiva Eger's son-in-law, in the Chuvas, in the 83rd Chuva, they take strong opposition to this. And the Bir Alacha, that one that we just read, and Dibra Maschal Ella has l'chayra Raya Brua. He said the Torah was not coming to say Nekoma and whatnot. The Torah was coming to say Din and Rachamim and Chesed and all these Tanoim. He says now, Avada, everyone agrees that if you have the Chaybem, even if we're not going to get a drop of mitzvahs from this person, we're Michal Shabbos. Rabbi say is a Raya Brua. I know what to tell you. It's a Raya Brua against the base mayor. How are you going to answer? Here's a Raya Brua. The Gemara says that there's a situation that we're mefachim the gal. That we have a case over here that the Laida Nebuch, the building fell, and the building fell. And now we want to know, can we do Chil Shabbos to take off all the rubble? And we know that Al Pi Roiv, the person that's under all that rubble is a guy. There's a chance he's a Jew. I'm not talking where there's Ava and whatever that we spoke about. But Al Kapanim, there's a chance he's a Jew. But Al Pi Roiv, 9 chances out of the 10 chances he's a guy. The halacha is we're Michal Shabbos. Even on Sveikis, we're Michal Shabbos. Fact the Chafetz Chaim. Now comes this guy. Oh, thank you so much. You saved my life. Now, we're talking about a case of where we don't know if he's a guy or a Jew, and he doesn't know if he's a guy or a Jew. It's somebody that we're not sure, Al Pi Halacha, Al Pi Roiv, he's a guy, but there's a chance he's a Jew. Now he comes to us, and he says, thank you so much, you saved my life. By the way, am I a Jew? So we go through the math, the cheshbon, and we look at the books. It says Al Pi Roiv, he's a guy. We're going to tell him, you're a guy, and go and be a guy, and go and be Michal Shabbos, you're a guy. That's what he says. We're going to tell him, go and be Michal Shabbos, you're a guy. We don't know who he is, Michal. Al Pi Roiv, he's a guy. Says the Chafetz Chaim, so we're saving his life, and we're never going to get one mitzvah out of him. He's going to live the rest of his life as a guy. So the Chafetz Chaim, Al Pi Dinya goy gomer, lo yikayim shum mitzvah. Af apike pikuach nefesh, ein olchem achar roiv, because Chashin and Shem is Yisrael. So the Chafetz Chaim just proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, the Chayra. It might be a Rashi that says a little different than this, but the Chayra just proved that even though we're not going to have the math, we're not going to get one mitzvah. The Chaybem works even when you're not going to get a Shmiras mitzvahs. And with this, he goes on to say that that's why Huadin, a goisis, like we said before, that's why a goisis, we're going to be Machal Shabbos. That's what the Bir Halacha says in this Dibra Maschel. That's why for even a person that's a shoite, we're going to be Machal Shabbos for, even though we're not going to get any mitzvahs out of him. But the Geder of the Chaybem works even without Chalel Shabbos Echas. Now, the Maisa, the Mishabura does say a Chiddush in the Bir Halacha here. He says, if somebody's Chayiv Mises Bezdin, he says, well, that's different. Raising the Pri Megadim, if he's Chayiv Mises Bezdin, the Nafal of a Gal, so he says, well, in that case, we're not going to save him. He says, B'yamim akadmoinim. B'yamim akadmoinim. But he says, in that case, we're not going to save him. Why? He says, Lanias Daiti, excuse me, the Pri Megadim says we are going to be Machal Shabbos because we're not killing him on Shabbos. So therefore, there's a Chayi Shah for the person that's Chayiv Mises Bezdin on Shabbos. The Bir Halacha on that argues. Merid the Gezach. He says, because HaTorah Chosal Chayi Shah, the Torah had Rachmanis on the Chayi Shah. On who? On someone that's chas on his own life. But this person is a Gavra Katila and Machmas Rishasai. So he says, so therefore he's not any better than the Apikorsim and the Rai Behema and the Rai Beh Medaka. It's a big Chiddush. It's a big Chiddush. Our Chashulchan also says the same thing, Taka, in Sif Daled. Very interesting Chiddush. No, the Nafkamina, Versteitzach, Mumarim, and the people that try to fight against Klal Yisrael and against the Torah Kedosha. They, of course, are Mumar Lahachas and B'Shayim, and the only reason you save them is Al Eva. Chiloinim of today's day and age, I don't mean the Chiloinim that are coming to uproot Klal Yisrael, but the Chiloinim that just, the regular guy that walks around the street. So that's a very old fight. We spoke about it many times already. That's the Chazon Ish in your Adaisim and base. Sif Tes, Zion takes a much more liberal approach, and he says that no, they were mechanech against from people, and it's not their fault. So therefore, they have a din of Tinik Shenishba. Hagam, we're not going to get one mitzvah out of them, but we'll be Machal Shabbos for them, not just Al Eva. And it's Yadua that the other Chreinim, Rav Moshe, for example, others went very, very strong, not like this. They see what's going on, and they see what's a from person, and they should look into it. They're not a Tinik Shenishba. They do have a din of a Rasha. Okay, it's not enough Gemina really, because for Eva, we are going to be Machal Shabbos. No, also Kavachaimer, a person that was from and that he kicked Yiddishkeit. And yes, he had lots of bad rabbis and whatever. Okay, but there's lots of people that didn't kick Yiddishkeit. So he for sure has a din of a Rasha. That is no Shaila. Avad, you have to try to be Makaravim by voices Shalava like the Chazon Ish says. Right? But to say he's a Tinik Shenishba, that's very, very difficult. Avad, you can't say that. No, we'll end with one Shaila over here, a few Shailas actually. One Shaila is like this. Now that we're saying that we're Machal Shabbos, even when we have just V'chaybem or just Chalel Shabbos Echas, and even for a Safek, and even though we're not going to get any mitzvahs, it's interesting, Shaila can clear. What's the halacha about being Machal Shabbos for a situation of where it's not a pikuach nefesh mitzad it's physical, but mitzad that if the person's going to have tremendous agmas nefesh and tremendous stress, in Pashit Khalil will die of a heart attack, Rahman al-Islam le'aleinu. But a situation of tremendous stress. What do I mean? I mean, there's a very interesting tshuva in the Hilchos Shloim and Chelik Aleph in Siman Zayin. Now, there's a little bit of a history to understand. There's an Aderes, and the Kuntras Oiver Oirech on Siman Shin Lamed Daled that declares a very interesting shayla. He writes over there that there was this Rav Charlap, and he was a big goyin, and he was based in a Bialystok, and he had I don't know if he had a fire, but all of his ksavim were destroyed. And he died, I think he writes over there, he dies a few days later of Agmas Nefesh. All of his ksavim were destroyed. So the Meister Shlomo Zalman declares a very interesting shayla. We know there's a whole entire siman in Shulchan Aruch Shin Lamed Daled, and there's an entire parak in Shabbos, parak called Kisvei, which discusses a house that's burning down. And we know that when a house is burning down, Kimat, Avada today, there could be Pekuach Nefesh Shilas. Today we have gas lines, and today the buildings are tremendous, and it's a whole different world. But let's say there was a situation of where it was borrowed, there was no Pekuach Nefesh, and the house was burning down. And in those days, Rabbi Yisai Nishkeven ken Swiss bank accounts. So that was the Gantzef Megan was burning down. The halacha was you weren't even allowed to ask a goy to put out the fire when there's no Pekuach Nefesh. You were allowed to be maramis to him that koila mechabe and a mafsid, and over there putting out a fire is not even a deraisa. It's a moshe tzvich legufa. And Alpha BK, that's a Gantzef Perek. Okay, today maybe you could ask a guy because you have to know what's the pshat then. They didn't have mezuzahs. Mishabura says over there in Shilam Adal Sivkot, I think it was Samaches, that you're allowed to put out the fire on your day guy. You're allowed to tell the guy to save the kisvei kodesh or the mezuzahs. So I don't know, maybe then you could take the mezuzah out of the wall like that. But certainly a guy you're allowed to for the mezuzahs. And anyways, today there could be matzavim at pikuach nefesh, so you could call the fire department. But al kaponim, we're clearing in the etzem adin. In the etzem adin, so the Maisa, there's a ganze parak that says you can't put out the fire. The guy's house is about to burn down. He doesn't have anything else. So hodish can underhoisen after the fire burns down. He's got nothing except for the shirt on his back. Okay, you're allowed to pack your shirts up, a bunch of shirts you can wear outside. Okay, but al kaponim, it's a big pella. Isn't he going to have unbelievable agnes nefesh? I'm sure there were people that the houses never burnt down, and I'm sure there were people that died of a heart attack. So Shlomo Zalman says, so Chayra, shouldn't we be allowed to, it's a kasha on the whole parak. Shouldn't we be allowed to put out the fire because of the vikuach nefesh? It's at least like a suffix, Rabbi say, no? And Shlomo Zalman says an unbelievable chiddush. He says, you know what? If you have that kind of tsar, it's ki'ilu meimis atzmoi v'lo yayesh. You did it to yourself. Since we see that there are people that are able to haltzich, so you did it to yourself. It's a big chiddush, Rabbi say. Let's say you know this person and you know he can't deal with pressure and you know he can't deal with anything and you know already his blood pressure is high and you know already the doctor said that he has stress and you see the house burning down, chas v'chalila, Rachmana litzlan, 1,000 times, and you see he's having stress and you know that it's true as Shlomo Zalman said that he's not going to be able to handle it and he did it to himself. But Rabbi said, what's the din of when somebody does it to himself? What do I mean? What's the halacha? If you know a person, he tried to commit suicide, chas v'chalila, Rachmana litzlan, are you not allowed to save him? He did it to himself. He did it to himself. So there's an unbelievable chiddush in Rosh Shlomo Lekluger, in Minchas Chinuch, in Mitzvah, Reish Lamed Zayin, Eis Beis. He says, L'chayra, he says, Hare, how could you say over here the mitzvah of L'samed al dam reyecha? All right, the mitzvah is to do a shavas aveda. Hashivai say loy. So to save him, there's no shavas aveda. It's aveda midas. So he says, it's on Shabbos to be Michal Shabbos for him. Also, Shabbos aveda and aveda midas. So he says an unbelievable chiddush. He says, maybe on Shabbos you're not allowed to save him. Now the Igros Moshe in your Deich Chelik Beis in Kufayin Dalid Anaf Gimel Dibra Masav L'chein. In Chelik Gimel at the end in Seif Tzadi, he says, Mechoyev lahatza lechalol Shabbos ha'ma'aber beloy pikpok. And does a zikr no shayla l'aloch l'maisa of all the plaiskim that you do have to save him even though he did it to himself. So what's the difference that he did it to himself? Seif, he did it to himself, and he's in this situation right now. So to say l'chayra, it's a little bit schwer. I don't know. I did see a very interesting chiddush. I saw that Rav Nebenzahl in his Mishnah Berurah, Rav Nebenzahl, the Rav of the old city, he was the Talmud of Rav Shlomo Zalman, the Talmud Chaver of Shlomo Zalman. He says, Legabe, to put out a fire, he writes this in Shin Chav Tes in his Mishnah Berurah called Yitzchak Yikadeh. He says, Legabe, putting out a fire to prevent a heart attack. So Rav Shlomo Zalman answered, Danti Lefanav, I danced in front of him, and I said, the Chayot should be mutter, v'chai b'hem, loy lavi l'matzah p'kuchem, and b'soif yom of chazer bay. He says at the end of his life, Rosh Shlomo Zalman was taka chayzer on this, and that Lamaisa, he was, so I'll end off with a tremendous chiddush from the Igros Moshe. L'chayr, there's a raya from the Igros Moshe about this shaila. What's a shaila? Is a person allowed to be Michal Shabbos in order to prevent a tremendous agmas nefesh, which could lead lidei pikuach nefesh? So Rabbi Say, we mentioned before in Igros Moshe, there's an Igros Moshe Yerdei Chelik Beis and Siman Kufayin Daled. It's a beautiful tshuva. Rav Moshe over there, Rabbi Say, is going on our toisus in Baba Mitzvah Kufayin Daled that we spoke about, and we spoke about that Eliyahu Novi. How is he allowed to go and be Michal Shabbos? Michal is kahuna. Hooray, he's a kohen, and we saw that from there was a raya l'chayra to a few things. First of all, we asked the kasha, the chayr, there's no v'chai b'hem because the child is not alive. So there's no v'chai b'hem. So we said from there must be a raya to Chalel Shabbos Echos. And that even if you have just Chalel Shabbos Echos, we're going to get Shmir Shabbos out of this kid. So then you're allowed to do an Aveira in order to get more mitzvahs. Okay. And then we said that's why Tosfos says, Borer Sheyichayehu, because he went with the sheet that the Nitziv went, that the only time you have Chalel is when it's a Vadai. But if you have suffix, then it's only by v'chai, and we paskin not like that. But that's what Tosfos says. Rav Moshe has a whole different mahalach in Tosfos. Rav Moshe has the same kashas that we have on Tosfos. How is it that he was allowed to go in? HaRav didn't have v'chai b'hem because the child was dead. Says the guy in Rav Moshe, unbelievable. Sarich loymar, ein kavana mishum pikuach nefesh. Dameis, because already he's dead, so there's no v'chai b'hem. Ela mishum pikuach nefesh da'ein. The mother was there seeing this baby. This was her child that she davened for, that Eliyahu Hanavi promised her. And she saw her child was being nifter. And she had so much agmas nefesh, Eliyahu Hanavi thought that she's gonna die. Ha'eim hayam mitzteres ma'oid al b'shvil mitzvah gedoyla v'amuna b'Hashem yisparach u'b'neviyav l'farnes Eliyahu meis b'na. First Bakra. Then he says, maybe Eliyahu Hanavi was afraid he himself was going to die. His own pikuach nefesh. He was going to get so sick from it because of him, meis ben almana, asher misgarimai. And even though there was haftacha, because the pasuk says over there, Damuna v'anivi of the farnes Eliyahu meis bena. Yes, a meiser v'isai. So, what's Rav Moshe saying? You know why we're Mechal Shabbos over there? We're being Mechal, not the Shabbos, I keep saying Shabbos, the Kahuna. You know why we're being Mechal the Kahuna over there? Not for the child, because there's no V'chai B'hem on the child. The child is dead. Says Rav Moshe, we're being Mechal Shabbos for who? For the Mama, or for Eliyahu. Rabbi Isai. But that's Agmas Nefesh. That's Agmas Nefesh. It's his responsibility to halzuch and to be able to not be so upset that he's going to die from the Agmas Nefesh, like our friend by the fire. What do you see from the Goyim Rav Moshe? Murdik Chiddush. You see that if you see that you know this person is going to have so much Agmas Nefesh that he might have a heart attack, or the woman might have a heart attack, the Eishes, the mother of the Almana might have a heart attack, the mother of the Ben Almana might have a heart attack. So then you're going to be allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. You'll be allowed to be Mechal Shabbos, even though it's what we call a tsar, I suppose, a stress, a tsar of Agmas Nefesh. But to prevent the Pikuach Nefesh, and even though you did it to yourself, but you're going to be allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. Halavai Rabbi Isai, nor the Gishmak of the Sugya, and Nish the Lemaisa of the Sugya.